this.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, you're here. Okay, आपकी वीडियो चली गई थी. I'm either ways आप मुझे बता दें किस तरह से आप फ्लो करेंगे. मेरी अरमान से जब लास्ट बात हुई थी तो मैंने उनसे खाली कहा था एक क्वेश्चन 1 और 2 को फ्लिप कर दें.
Right.
क्वेश्चन 2 पहले क्वेश्चन 1 उसके बाद. इसके अलावा आई थिंक आई एम प्रीटी ओके. एंड इसीलिए मैं टाइम पूछ रही थी ताकि मैं उस हिसाब से सवालों के जवाब दूं कि जितना मेरे पास टाइम है. ऑल्सो आई वांटेड टू मेक श्योर कि am I taking questions directly from the audience?
You can do that. You can do that because they will be showing up in our comments.
Mm-hmm.
So you can answer the questions as you see fit. Uh, I
But
have
can
the
we do that at the end? So, like, once you're done with all your questions, if we have
yes,
time on the broadcast, then I can go back and answer all the questions that needs to be answered.
perfect. Yes, why not?
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we have 6 questions. So you want question 2 to be before question 1.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think question 3 is relevant?
I don't, but I still, because it was there, I kind of prepped for it. But it's very technical. It's very biological and psychological jargon heavy, that
Right.
particular answer. So if you want, you can get rid of that question, and then if we
I
have
think we
time,
can remove question 3. And I was looking at your profile, and I believe you follow the holistic approach.
yes,
So I think we can start off with that.
yeah. That's just a
Merging the question
very
one.
yeah. That's a yeah, and that will be in some ways covered in the first question. If you want, I can cover
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, that would
Um,
be perfect.
yeah, definitely. Oh, there's a
Mhm. Right. So should we start? Right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm your host Yasser Kamer, and today we have a today our guest is from the United States, Miss Sam. I'm so sorry, Miss Simreen, uh, and we'll be talking about the human mind and how we are coping with the current situation of the world. So, hello, Miss.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Right. So, Miss, can we hear about a bit? Can we hear a bit about you?
Yeah, of course. I am originally from Karachi, actually. I moved to United States around 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. I did my bachelor's I did a double major in humanities and psychology from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And then I did my master's in counseling and therapy in 2018 from Northwestern University. I went ahead and worked at University of Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan for a year, and I recently came back from there, and I am now working for a private practice in Chicago, Sarah Center for Behavioral Health, as a staff therapist.
Wow, that is amazing. So, Miss, can you tell us about how uh, what is basically the difference between the human mind, the human brain, and how emotions play into the human life?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the answer is not so straightforward, and there's a lot more that goes into understanding the human brain, and there's of course different aspects to it. One is very biological, right? So neurons in your brain and parts of the brain and what they're responsible for, and that's a different topic and a different arena to look into. The other aspect is of course thoughts and emotions, and things that are more not as biological, not like they're very intangible, right? There is no way to quantify them in a lot of ways, and so that is a very different topic. When we talk about emotions, I think one of the biggest things that we should understand that emotions are, of course, very natural. It's a natural process, uh, but the ability to address the emotion and to understand your own emotions, that comes from how you're nurtured, how you grow up, right? So nature versus nurture. I hope that everyone has heard that phrase, right? So nature plays a role because biologically, right, you get thoughts, you get feelings, and a lot of the behaviors for any normal human being, like you get your thoughts, then you have emotions and feelings, and then your behaviors are mostly dependent on those thoughts and feelings. um, we When something happens, right, we think about it, we get angry, and then we react, right? There are different ways of going about that. Um, One of the things that I would like to add to this is also how emotions play a role in our daily life. It's very we usually keep, when we're working with clients, we have like a whole list of feeling words, right? So how do you describe your emotions, right? So there's not only just happy, sad, angry, right? There are thousands of words in our vocabulary that we can use to pinpoint a certain, like even within sadness or within happiness, right? Like what exactly you're feeling. So those emotions, I think it's important to understand that there's more to it than what we are used to, and the idea is to strive to understand your emotions better.
So understanding the whole nature versus nurture debate and the emotion aspect of the human mind, would you believe that the current situation of the world, the pandemic and the quarantine that has followed, do you believe that emotions do have a huge role to play in this? Uh, Considering all the negative thoughts that people go through when they're locked up in one place.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot that goes into play, right? One of the things that we have to understand, there's a term called emotion regulation. Emotion regulation is one's ability to, in some ways try to control your own emotions, right? It's not always possible, but there are ways that you can, kind of not control your emotions completely, but control like how you react when you're feeling those emotions in a lot of ways, right? So a lot of times when we feel like, so right now with the pandemic, right, it's not just the pandemic, it's the pandemic started in December, January timeframe, and it's been going on and it's there, but then there are so many other things that are happening around the world, right? Like with this huge explosion in Beirut, or this fire in Ajman, or like, just things are happening, things are piling up, right? So of course you're going to think about negative things, right? Like you're uh, and one thing that I would like to mention, because I think it's going to come up in our conversation, is I don't know if anyone's heard about Maslow's hierarchy of
Hierarchical
needs.
needs.
Yes.
Yes.
So uske andar, basically, right, like your basic needs are your biological needs, right? So you want food, you want sleep, you want water, right? And you need shelter, right? You
Correct.
need somewhere to live and feel safe. Usually we want to feel safe. That's why you call it a home, right? And those are the basic needs. And when what happens is that when things like this happen, right, your basic necessity of feeling safe, right, in an environment is kind of challenged, right? So it's not about that pandemic is happening. There are a lot of fears associated with your own safety, your own, just not just whatever's happening in the world, but for yourself. So there's one that's individual emotions that are coming up, and then emotions that are coming up for the collective that's out there on a global scale. Does that make sense?
Right. That does make sense, in fact. My next question would be that, considering the current situation of the world, and the teenage human mind, now our society as a whole has seen some extremist atrocities. What happened yesterday and the day before that in Lebanon, uh, and and all the other past events. So, is it possible that when a person is locked up in one house, one place, can the emotions trigger a past event, something that you're not thinking about, but eventually it does creep in?
Yes. And this is not just related to what's happening in the world right now. One of the things that I don't think I mentioned, but I actually specialize in working with people who have prior trauma, especially childhood trauma, right? So a lot of my clients have gone through like child rape, or sexual harassment, or just sexual abuse on growing up, or domestic violence in the house. So a lot of these things, right? So as a child, when you go through these things, you suppress these memories because you're more in a survival mode, right? Like, how do I just get through the day, right? Because if you keep thinking about it, you're not being able to function, right? Daily functioning, there's a term called daily functioning, right? And you're not able to do that. So then what you do is you suppress all of these bad memories and things that just are not letting you move on in life, right? So a lot of these events that happen, right, a lot of times when we're watching news and we hear something happened, and if we can relate to it, then yes, a lot of our traumas are going to come back, a lot of our past experiences are going to come back. So yeah, that's very much possible that this is happening with a lot of people around the world, right? But the idea is, of course, regulating those emotions in the correct manner, right? And it's not always easy to do that.
All right. So, is it possible that if a person is better or considerably better in terms of finances, uh, as compared to another individual, would that person have a better control over his or her emotions? Would
No.
that person? No.
No, I don't think finances. There are a lot of factors that go into how well you can regulate your emotions, and I don't think finances automatically, assume. And one of the things that you should keep in mind is that there are not just poor people or people who are not financially as stable who are suffering from any mental health issues, right? Doesn't have to be a disorder, but even mental health, like in depression, anxiety, just even daily day-to-day stress, right? It's not just for people who are not financially stable. I think people who are financially stable maybe have more issues in life,
Yeah.
right? But there are different kinds of issues, right?
Right.
um, what what kind of enables us to understand that who's able to have a better emotion regulation in their system is how you've been raised, right?
Right.
So one of the things to understand is if you grew up in a household where, showing sadness or anger or happiness or excitement or any positive or negative emotion, any expression of those emotions were not permitted, right? So if you were, if you're a child and if you're sad or if something's bothering you, right, you cry, right? You cry or
Right.
you scream because you don't know better, right? So you are dependent on your caregivers to teach you the right way to channel those emotions, right? But if you were not taught how to do that, right, then you have these unhealthy ways of showing emotions, right? And so what happens is, so if you are trained, right, so I can give you a simple example, right? So if there's domestic violence in the house, right,
Right.
um, when the child sees their parents throwing things or banging doors or screaming on top of their lungs, that's what they learn, right? Because it's not what a parent says, it's what a parent does that makes
Right.
the
The
difference.
child will pick up on
Exactly.
act on actions rather than verbal cues.
Yes.
So, all right. So, considering a child lives in such a household, uh, can or will develop certain mental disorders, for example, bipolar. Now, bipolar, is it directly related to bad emotional experience in the past, or can you develop it just like that?
Um, so bipolar is so okay. Let me just put it out there. People can be predisposed to certain mental illnesses, and I think bipolar is one of them. So what I mean by being predisposed is if you have genetically transmitted that, right? So like if your parents, even if it wasn't diagnosed, right, like suffered from anxiety or depression or have history, like even and you have to understand that there is transgenerational stuff, that intergenerational transgenerational stuff that's happening, right? So your genes are being transferred on, so it's not just your parents but it's their parents and their parents and what you get out of those genes, right? So if you're predisposed for it and the situation triggers it, then yes, you
So
will
you're saying
experience
that
that.
a mental disorder can come from your parents and grandparents. It's a generation. You can inherit a mental disorder.
You can inherit like a gene which makes you predisposed, but that does not mean, so there are a lot of people who may be predisposed but because their lives they don't really get a trigger or an environmental push for that to come out, to come to the surface, it doesn't come up,
So
right?
it's exactly like nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
So you
Yes.
need trigger.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's
All
not
right.
necessary that someone needs to be genetically, predisposed to that. Like people who are not predisposed can also develop it based on the traumas that they go through in their lives and experiences that they've had. So there are two different aspects to it. But yes, if you're predisposed, you're more likely to respond in a way that your body has those symptoms, if triggered.
All right. A question. For example, dreams. How does that play into our emotional spectrum? For example, like using dreams as a gateway.
So, dreams are very controversial. Let me just put this out there. The research about dreams is extremely very controversial. Some people, so I don't know, I'm sure everyone has heard of Freud, right? Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud, father of
Uh,
psychology.
yes. Um, so, what happens is that in when Freud was studying dreams, of course he had a different idea, right? So he thought that dreams were, a gateway into unconscious mind, things that were not on the surface of your thought processes. It showed unresolved, desires and emotions and traumas, which in some ways is still, some people believe that, but what they believe is more the unconscious mind, right? It could be memories, it could be traumas, it could be thoughts, it could be emotions, it could be anything, but it's just something that's stored in your unconscious mind that comes out in your dreams. A lot of people associate fears with dreams, right? So
Right.
things that you fear a lot in your life, that's going to show up in your dreams. But of course, it's very controversial, because there is no solid evidence that shows that this is what dreams is. It's all just analysis and theories that are out there, and there are so many different point of views that it's very difficult for me to like, tell you that this is the right one. But there are different ways that you can analyze, your own dreams.
All right. So in the comments, we have a personal opinion of Mr. Afridi.
Hmm.
And he says that I disagree with your last point. I think at certain point that child had been to domestic violence, trying to understand that what his her parents did was wrong, and want to change that specific thing in their life, or don't want to do the thing ever.
I agree. I didn't say that they're never gonna pick up on that, but as a child, you do pick up on these patterns, right? Because you don't know any better, right? So as you grow up and as you start understanding these things better, then yes, there's a high chance that you would want to rectify that, right? You would like I can give you my example, right? When I was growing up, I saw domestic violence in my house, in other people that I knew, and sometimes I've had that reaction when I was a child, when I threw things, and when I banged doors when I was a child, because I didn't understand that was not the right way, right? Until I gained my own intellectual capabilities and understood that that's not how things are supposed to be. That's not normal, right? Because if you see it on the continuous basis, then it becomes normal, right? So I'm not saying that it doesn't change, or it doesn't, like, people don't realize it. They do. But as kids, a lot of people do, a lot of kids do pick up on these things, and not everyone actually would want to change that. I've seen people who stick to that, and their argument is that, I, like, my parents did it, so I can do it, right? I mean,
All
I've
right.
worked with patients like that.
From my minimum understanding of psychology, I do remember a study conducted about a Bobo doll and children beating up the doll because they'd seen an adult do that.
Yeah.
So this is pretty much the same, that children will pick up on these certain cues.
They do. And you can't blame the child, right? Because as a child, you're not, you're still developing a lot of your brain, and so it's difficult to even understand what's right, what's wrong, right? There's a very later stage in the developmental, stages for a child, when they understand that, what's right, what's wrong, what needs, like, and see, it also depends on who your caregiver is, right? Someone has to model those things also, right? Like, if someone is a very sheltered child and has no idea what's going on in the world, but believes that whatever is happening in my home is normal, right? Their understanding of what's right and wrong will probably occur later in the life, right?
Right.
When they step out of that bubble that's been created for them.
So it's different for individual to individual. For example,
Yes.
what's right in one society will be considered wrong in the other.
Oh yes, I mean, but that's a different debate, right?
That's a different debate.
That's not for the child. Yes, for the child, of course, it depends on individual basis for them to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and what age and what phase of their life they reach there. That's different. But
Right.
what's right in one society, what's wrong in one society, that's a different debate, and that's a not, maybe a more non-psychological debate in some ways, because it's just, what's normal in one society
Well,
is not normal in others. So that's a different debate. But yes, in terms of that, and I think psychology in general, you have to understand every single person is different. No, there are no two people who are exactly the same in any
so,
psychological way.
all right. So no individual is similar to another one. So we have another question in the comments. Can a person suffer from schizophrenia if no one in the family has it? Possible or not?
Um, I'm actually not sure about that. I'm pretty sure that there are cases out there, and I've known people who who don't have anyone else in their family suffering from that. But as I said, right, like, we don't know that because we don't know the whole genealogy of them, right? So if even if your
Right.
direct parents or grandparents don't have schizophrenia, but maybe, the ancestors, someone had it or something
Someone
like
has.
that, right? So the study of genealogy is very important in understanding what genetically what you have inherited, if that makes sense.
That does. That does. In fact. How would you explain the fact that in the previous year, in the older generations, mental health was a taboo topic, and in our generation, it's more on the forefront. people are actually giving it uh, more importance. For example, what can we say? Okay, I think I lost my train of thought. Anyway, your opinion, please.
Um, yes, and I think there's still a lot of stigma out there, to be honest. There's still a lot of countries, a lot of societies that still don't view mental health as an important part of a person's development and just in terms of even sustaining life, right? But I mean, definitely it's changed in the past few decades. But I think a lot more work is still needed to be done, right? The reason I say that is because, you know, yes, there is recognition that I'm suffering, right? People now recognize and even accept to themselves that, okay, I may have anxiety or depression. But the idea of reaching out for help to professionals or to, even try to address what you're going through comes at a very later stage when things are extremely very bad, right? Like you come to a breaking point and that's when you reach out to someone. And some people in those cases still don't reach out to people, right? and
Right,
and I know it's a very cliche example, but if you have a headache and if you're not feeling well or if you have a fever, you do go see your doctor, right? So why not, if you're starting to feel anxious and feeling depressed, then reach out to someone so you don't have to reach that breaking point, right? So I
right.
think that is still a big stigma. But yes, definitely in terms of spreading awareness and even acknowledging and accepting your own struggles, yes, it's been going in the right direction.
All right, so we have another question. Honestly, each child is different. That's how the balance of the world goes.
Yeah. I,
It
and
does.
I Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I don't know if it's the balance of the world necessarily, but yes, each child is different. Each child is different. Each human, each human being is different. And there's no doubt about that. When even when we're doing our research and studies, and you can read countless studies, right? I don't think there's any person in the field of psychology who can say that two people are the same, right? Even if someone has similar symptoms or going through depression, one person's depression may look something very different from the other person's depression, right? So it's different. You can't say that it's the same.
Right. We have another comment by Mr. Anand. What is the role played by psychology in development of artificial intelligence?
That's a very interesting
That's a
question,
very interesting
and I
question.
wish I had an answer to that. I am nowhere close to any computer science, field. I'm very much into my own field, but yes, I think there's definitely a role that's being played in artificial intelligence, because
Right.
at the end of the day, you're trying to mimic the human brain.
All right. I have a question
Yeah,
related to this, but
yeah.
not entirely. Now, considering artificial intelligence, and from what is projected for the next 10, 20 years, we're going to be seeing a rise in artificial intelligence. Now, certain careers will be completely finished because of this. So, do you believe that because of AI, there'll be a rise in mental health issues, or will there be a decrease? Considering that there'll be less human interaction.
Um, I think there's a two-part answer to that question. So the first part is that you have to understand that with increasing AI technology, there's definitely decreasing human interaction, but there's also decreasing employment,
Right.
right? So of course, when people are not employed, right, there's lack of funds and just financial stability for people, right? And so when you're struggling, right, even financially, a lot of emotions come up, a lot of so I don't want to say that people are going to be suffering from disorders, but yes, mental health issues will definitely rise in that direction, because there's more people struggling for employment, right? That's the one fold answer. The second fold answer to that question is that yes, human interaction is going down, but it's not just AI that's making the human interaction go down. I think in general, because of just social media and technology, the value of a personal interaction with a human being has going down, right? We're on a screen right now, right? i'm not
Exactly.
i'm not there. those
Right.
those interactions are being more valued, right? But one of the things that we need to realize is that we are social animals, right?
Exactly.
We need that human touch. We need that connection that's more personal to feel. And again, that's this goes to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you go a little up on the pyramid, you'll see the sense of belonging, the sense of identity, and just where just knowing that you have a personal connection with friends and family and romantic relationships, right? You want that, right? So you
Right.
can't have that virtually, right? So the understanding of that is that yes, as soon as we realize that the human touch is important, it's necessary for you to have that. But if you're decreasing that human interaction in its pure form, then yes, definitely people will feel the different things that can happen. But yes, mental health issues can definitely arise from that.
All right. So again, linking this entire conversation to another question, child development psychology.
Yeah.
What ways can a child psychology be developed after the age of 5, and will it be pertinent considering the whole AI debate?
Um, Again, two different questions, but I like how you mix them up. But the thing to understand that child psychology is a field in itself, right? I
Right.
can't in like 2 minutes or 5 minutes give you like a brief of like, okay, this is child psychology after 5 years of age, right? Because child psychology doesn't start after 5 years of age. It starts as soon as the child is born, right?
Right.
And I'm sure everyone has heard of early childhood education, right? And it's usually that early childhood education part is actually not education for the child, but it's actually educating parents how to be a good parent, if
Right.
you in some ways look at it, right? Because the psychology of the child is being impacted from that age. Even if, like, if I ask you today, do you have any memories of when you were 2 years old or 3 years old, 4 years old?
Definitely not.
No,
Maybe
right?
a few, maybe very hazy few.
Very vague, yeah, very vague
Anyway,
something. Okay, yeah, maybe I remember this phase or this house or this place or something like that, right? But not a vivid memory,
true.
right? um, and so what happens is that a lot of these things we don't realize, but just because we think that the child wouldn't remember, right? As parents or as siblings or caregivers, whoever you have around you, don't really pay attention to these things. But the idea is to understand that the child psychology starts way before 5 years of age. And even after 5 years of age, there are different stages. So if you want, I can send you some resources to forward
And that
to.
would be nice.
Yeah, to forward to Sundas Anwar. I'm assuming
Onward.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can forward those resources, and that will tell you just phases of child development and what each phase of child development will show in and how it will present in your child's life, and how you can identify and make sure that you're playing the right part that you need to play in that developmental stage.
Right. So, Miss, I'm guessing we can take the last question.
Sure.
Sure. All right. So, what do you have to say about the belief that children cannot plan and succeed in committing suicide? That is a very dark question, sir, Mr. Anand. What do you say about that?
I think suicide is a very sensitive topic.
Huh?
Um, Whether it's children, whether it's adults, whether it's seniors, it can happen in any stage of life, right? And understanding that suicide has its own psychology in some ways. Understanding that is a very complex, place to be in, right? But yes, in definitely children, like, it's not like I haven't heard of children committing suicide. Like, I have, younger children, like 7, 8, 10 years, 10, 15 years. I've seen, I've heard about those stories. So it's not like it doesn't happen or it can't happen. um, it just depends on how the child is, and how far do you take that child that they have to find ways to do something, to do something and harm themselves in that way, right? But no, it's not. I have seen children, like, suicide cases in children. It just, it doesn't come out in media. It doesn't, it's not always out there for people to read the story about it or something like that, but it's out there. um, you just have to look harder.
So, suicide in children? Nature or nurture?
Um, I think I think it's more nurture, to be honest,
Yeah.
because a lot of the times when children do, they're pushed to do something like that, it's mainly because they've gone through a trauma in their life, right? And a lot of people that I have come across, even so, like I even had a couple of students who, I mean, they're older now, but had a time in their life because they went through child rape when they were 5 years old or 6 years old or 8 years old, right? And so they were like, we don't want to live anymore. How do we live with this? How do you live with that memory, right? How do you live with what happened to your body, your soul, your mind, just your existence, right? So a lot of these things can really push a child in that direction, but it also depends, again, going back to emotion regulation, right? How well do you regulate your emotions so that you don't reach that point, right? If that, like, I
All
hope
right.
that makes sense.
All right. So thank you so much for your time, Miss Simreen, and you gave us such valuable insights. And I'm guessing we have to wrap up now. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated
Thank
you
you so
and
much for
your
joining us.
your listeners.